Good morning, Dan and Amy. Well, Donald Trump has a sit-down with Mexican President Peña Nieto this afternoon, and then he gives his much-anticipated policy speech on immigration today. What will that include? We talked to Steve Moore about some of what he had proposed, some talking points he wanted included in terms of kind of the economic piece of it. We've talked a lot about the policy aspect of it. We haven't talked as much about kind of, it's one thing to set forward a policy, it's another thing to implement that policy. And interagency cooperation between federal, state, and local law enforcement seems to be part of the conversation we need to have. And who better to have that with than the man that many people call America's sheriff, not the Department of Justice, but many other people, fresh off his primary victory in Maricopa County, Arizona yesterday. Pleased to be joined again by Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Joe, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, I have a little soft spot for Chicago. Married my wife's day. My son was born there when I was a young federal narcotic agent and worked in Chicago, a lot of undercover work. We didn't have the problems back then as we do now, unfortunately, in your great city when you talk about drugs and crime and shootings. I can go on and on.
Well, and then you moved to Arizona like everybody else who used to live in Chicago. So, Sheriff Joe, let me ask you this. What do you hope to hear from Donald Trump, and maybe you have conversations with him specifically on this topic, about the problem that you've been identifying for a number of years, the disconnect between federal law enforcement, immigration enforcement, and state and local law enforcement officers and leaders like yourself?
Well, we have to get the local police involved in the fight against illegal immigration. I remember in 2007 to 2009, I had the authority working under Homeland Security and ICE to enforce the illegal immigration laws. Of course, they took that authority away from me. I guess we were doing too good of a job. But we got to get back to that. We got to get back to recruiting and swearing in local cops to help the government fight this illegal immigration problem.
So what's the... Okay.
I hope that comes back. I'm sure it will when Donald Trump becomes president.
So what's the process now? Walk me through this and every one of our listeners, because you have separate parts of your jail that are for people who are here illegally and people that are here legally. Once they serve their time, how are they let out of prison, and whose hands do they fall into?
Well, that's a big problem. Donald made it a big priority to deport those criminals that are here in the United States, roaming the streets, because I can have my statistics to go out front and prove that we turn over 10,000 illegal immigrants in our jail system to ICE. And guess what? 38% have come back to the same jails that I run. And one guy came back 24 times. How come they're not being deported? If they are deported, we got a problem at the border. I don't know if it's that big of a problem where people come back 24 times. So I believe that they're being let out the back door, back on the streets, keep committing crimes, and come back to the jails that I run.
And
that's
by
the first priority: get these people out of this country and back where they came from.
And when you're talking about specifically people committing crimes, that coming back to your jail over and over again, you're talking about people not just committing the crime of being here illegally, but committing additional crimes, violent crimes in some cases, while they're here.
That's correct. They're not in the jails for being here illegally, period. They're here for all different types of crimes, murders and everything else. And we turn them over to the government to be deported, and 39% keep coming back to the same jails that I run.
And what does ICE say, ICE officials or federal law enforcement that you speak with say about that? What's their response to you?
Well, I've written 3 times to the Secretary of Homeland Security. I get, a Mickey Mouse, almost a form letter back. I never get a real answer as why they keep coming back. And that's something that's very critical. It has to be faced. So that should be the top priority. Get these guys that should have been deported. They're still roaming around committing crimes.
And your hands are tied
Only
where you
common
can't
sense.
you can't follow them and see where they go after they're released.
Where they're going, I guess they're still roaming the streets because we keep picking them up and put them back in jail. When you get guys come back 20, 22 times back to the jails, what's wrong with that? They should have been deported the first time. So we got that big problem that nobody wants to talk about.
And the thing that's so frustrating about that is if to listen to politicians talk in both parties, everyone agrees. Everyone agrees, and from the President of the United States on down, that people who have committed violent crimes who are here illegally should be deported. Everyone agrees with that. And yet you're talking about just in your county on the border, a border county in Arizona, Maricopa County, 40% of violent criminals coming back again and again and again. So the disconnect between politicians talking about this and what's actually being implemented by federal agencies.
Well, that's correct. That has to be corrected. That's a no-brainer. And when you come across a person that's here illegally, first of all, that's sort of a criminal offense, the last I heard, just to do that. They should be deported when they finish their sentence here for other crimes.
All right.
So that's a big problem.
Now, tonight you're going to be joining Donald Trump, I take it, on stage. And do you have any secret information, any exclusive details about what Donald Trump is going to roll out tonight in his immigration speech?
You know what? I supported him from day one, and what's really interesting, because I've endorsed campaign for many presidential candidates, and I say that because I've been in touch with many of them. It's funny that, from day one I supported him, but, his campaign, he never tried to entice me to say this, say that, don't say that. So I'm a Lone Ranger. He doesn't control me, but we happen to be on the same street on all our policies. But he doesn't try to force me what to say. So tonight, this will be my sixth time I've introduced him. And also, after I was the speaker, I had the pleasure of the Cleveland, Republican convention to talk at the last night. And so he doesn't put pressure on me. And but we see eye to eye, and what he says tonight, hey, I'm going to open up. I'll be speaking tonight too, and we'll see what happens with his policy on illegal immigration. I'm glad he's going to Mexico today to meet the president. He's a great deal maker. Maybe he'll make a deal with the president to crack down and stop the drugs from coming across our border and the illegal immigration, and work together. That's what I did when I was the director of Mexico City for the U.S. Drug Enforcement. You get together, you negotiate, and try to make deals and stop the problem. I hope that he will convince the president that something has to be done in Mexico. You can't count on Hillary. She was Secretary of State, most important position in the government other than the president. How many times has she and the president gone to Mexico? How many times? They should be there quite often. They're all over the world, but they all go to Mexico, one of our critical countries for furnishing our country with heroin and drugs, illegal migration.
So, Sheriff Joe, let me ask you a question about that as a practitioner, somebody who's on the front lines, not just kind of a policy wonk that's takes this issue at a distance. What kind of impact would you call it? Trump's wall, just call it a secure southern border. What kind of impact on your job and the battles you're fighting would a truly secure border have? Maybe not the entire solution, but how important is it to being part of the solution?
Are you talking about the wall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's wrong with a wall? We got drugs coming into our country, coming to Chicago, which nobody talks about. They talk about gangs and the social issues. Why don't they talk about all the drugs causing violence and the shootings and everything else? Nobody talks about the drug problem. So just to stop the drugs, from coming into our country, a wall is justified. Not just illegal immigration. You got terrorists, possibility of them coming into our country. So what's a big deal about a wall? I mean, that just shows that, and by the way, Hillary says this is awful, the Mexicans will never pay for a wall. The taxpayers will have to pay. Well, you know what? We give a lot of money to Mexico, foreign aid. If they don't build a wall, just take it out of foreign aid. So indirectly, they are paying for the wall. So why talk about costs? They spend billions of dollars, and they're arguing about spending money putting up a wall to stop this problem we have. Doesn't make sense.
All right. He is the Lone Ranger. He is Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Sheriff Joe, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the